Okay, so I'm introducing our first speaker, and I think it's kind of appropriate because I discovered this talent, Tom DiLiberto, because, God, it's not really that long ago. He's come a long way in a very short period of time. In February, Tom won a competition that we held at the American Association for the Advancement of Science's annual meeting. The competition was to see who would be America's science idol. Okay? He had to give a 3-minute talk. He beat out a very impressive field that included a rapper, Tom won, and a really funny talk about insect sex, but Tom won. So since then, we have been giving him every speaking opportunity possible, and I think that you are really going to enjoy hearing from him. Did I mention he's a meteorologist? And he's going to tell us about the weather of the future. Tom DiLiberto.
Thank you, thank you. So funny enough, I'm going to rap for you tonight, which is actually crazy. No, just kidding. So I'm here to talk about the wild weather of the future. And at any point tonight you want to tweet at me, feel free. There's my Twitter handle. Or afterwards you want to come talk to me, feel free. You can use my 20th century name. I'm Tom DiLiberto. As I mentioned, I'm a meteorologist. So weather. For the vast majority of people, the idea of the perfect weather is a beautiful sunny day with temperatures in the mid to upper 70s and maybe a light breeze. But to an extreme minority of slightly demented people, let's, just for the sake of argument, call them, I don't know, meteorologists. The perfect weather is extreme. It's hurricanes and tornadoes and thunderstorms. And we have a weird relationship with extreme weather. For most of us, our origin stories of why we got into meteorology is based on some sort of extreme weather event. And yes, we have origin stories just like superheroes. I'm, of course, not saying that meteorologists are similar to superheroes. I'm saying we are superheroes. We can see the future occasionally, for the most part. I'm not saying our powers are that spectacular. But our origin stories don't really involve being bitten by radioactive spiders or falling into radioactive goo or somehow using the sun's rays to become super strong. Because if you've met many meteorologists, you would know we're generally not really strong in the physical sense. We're more mentally tough. So our origin stories really involve being pelted with hail or impacted by a tornado, evacuated from a hurricane, or buried under 2 feet of snow. And yes, that's me rocking a one-piece snowsuit in the 1980s. I think I pulled it off back then when I was 4. I think it looked pretty good. Now, we even have, as meteorologists, superhero-like modes of transportation. We drive this thing into tornadoes because we're slightly crazy. Basically, if there was less extreme weather, there'd be a lot less of us. And we obsess over this stuff, constantly thinking about the what-ifs, comparing current forecasts to past ones, to get an idea of the impacts. From the way we name-drop storms, you'd think that they were celebrities we've met and we're name-dropping to try and impress someone. It's like, remember Andrew in '92? Yeah, but I lived through Hugo in '89. Well, I was alive during a super outbreak of '74. Well, I missed a week of school during the blizzard of '96. If you didn't know any better, you would think that we were deadheads talking about our favorite Grateful Dead concert. Because truth be told, meteorologists, we're kind of extreme weather groupies. But why should a normal person care about extreme weather at all, now or in the future? It doesn't affect that many people, and it doesn't occur that often. Well, for one thing, they're really, really expensive. In 2011, extreme weather disasters in the United States alone cost the country around $60 billion. Last year, that total was around $110 billion, thanks to Hurricane Sandy and a major drought in the middle part of the country. The most expensive year, though, was 2005, with the final bill $160 billion, thanks to hurricanes like Katrina and Rita. You may have heard of them. So $160 billion with a B. That's roughly the equivalent of 2.3 Bill Gates. Or, if you're keeping track at home, 1.5 million me's. That's a lot of me. Believe me, one of me is more than enough. You don't need any more than that. And it's not like any of this is going to get cheaper in the future, because we humans have this strange desire to build in really beautiful but incredibly dangerous and expensive places. Like, I don't know, let's say the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where we build major roads on spits of land less than 100 yards across. And yeah, this is unbelievably gorgeous, but it's not so pretty when the road has to constantly be rebuilt when any storm hits the Outer Banks. But let's be honest, the poster child for this sort of thing is Miami, with millions and millions of dollars of coastal development right up on the ocean. And at some point, my buddy Will Smith here is going to say, "Bienvenido a Miami," to a hurricane. And it's not going to be really good. Because truth be told, in the future, there's going to be less rural. And all less rural means is that there's more things for weather to destroy and more people to be impacted. So it's only common sense we care about how extreme weather is going to change into the future as we continue on with this giant experiment that we decide to play with our atmosphere. Because yes, climate change, it's happening. It's not like tons of people got together featuring thousands and thousands of scientists, and they all together decided they want to take your way of life from you and teach your kids to become gunless hippie commies who only eat vegetables or worse, ride a bike, or worse than that, bike share. Oh, awful. That's a little hyperbole. That's my nephew, and I have to say, he grows facial hair a lot faster than I do. I'm working on like 3 weeks here. He did that in like 13 seconds, so that's pretty good. So the annoying thing with climate change is it's much more complicated than a simple equation. But I like to think of the impacts on extreme weather due to climate change. It's like setting up dominoes. So sure, you knock over the first dominoes and other dominoes start to fall. But all of a sudden, things start to fall that you didn't even know you set up to start with. And unforeseen outcomes are the worst when you're a meteorologist because we try to make our livelihood predicting these things. And I'm already prepared for my inevitable nervous breakdown in 10 to 15 years. So if you see someone like in 10 years walking around the street just going crazy, giving you a forecast, it's probably this guy, not gonna lie. So how does climate change, how does it work? Well, basically, some energy that usually can escape into outer space can't because those extra greenhouse gases in the atmosphere act like a bouncer. And they're like telling the energy, like, look, energy, you're drunk, get out of here. And it re-radiates that energy back down to the surface, and the end result is a warming of the oceans and the warming of the land, which can have all sorts of impacts on weather and especially on extreme weather. Now, you may have guessed that with climate change and global warming, it's going to get pretty hot in here. Sorry, I apologize. Sorry, Nellie. Hot in her. Where in this case, her refers to planet Earth. So maybe somewhat of an obvious statement that in the future, we're expecting to see more really stupidly hot days and longer, more oppressive heat waves. This is actually an image of the thermometer in Death Valley of this year. At the moment, it recorded 129 degrees Fahrenheit, one of the warmest temperatures ever recorded in the country's history. That's gross. We just take a minute and just respect how gross that is. You can basically slow cook pork at this temperature. Although that actually sounds pretty delicious. That sounds actually really good. So the thing is, if you made a list, why should we care about extreme weather? If you made a list of extreme weather events in the United States by number of fatalities they cause per year, the #1 danger in the country are sharknadoes. I'm kidding, it's heat. Heat kills the most people per year in the country. And in the future, we're expecting to see the hottest temperature of the year. That would happen once every 20 years. So imagine, the hottest temperature in the last 20 years, by the middle to end part of this century, happening every 2 to 5 years. And by 2050, that new 1 in 20 year temperature will increase from 1 to 3 degrees Celsius from today. Now, I can kind of see there's probably a lot of people here who were brought up in the American school system. So 1 to 3 degrees Celsius is just a fancy European way of saying 2 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. So just for a thought experiment, imagine the hottest day this year and then add 2 to 5 degrees to it. Imagine how gross that would be. It's awful. And Pepco, the power company around here, has enough issues keeping the power on in a stiff breeze, let alone when everyone's running their air conditioner on max. So there might be some issues. Now, another basic outcome, though, of warming the atmosphere is that hotter air can simply hold more water in it. The atmosphere is like a sponge, and warming it is like Mother Nature investing in a larger, more absorbent, and name-brand sponge, which isn't necessarily a problem until that sponge is wrung out. And if there's more water available to fall, it will, all at once. So these heavy rain showers are likely to increase in the future with, again, a heavy rain shower that happens over 24 hours, that would happen once in 20 years, which in DC is like 5 to 6 inches of rain, could happen every 5 to 15 years in the future. And in the future with less rural and more development, you have to remember, pavement and heavy rain don't mix. This is a shout out to all the Canadians out there. That's Toronto, for the few Canadians out there. Who's Canadian? All right. And the water's got to go somewhere. So there's going to be an increase of localized flooding and flash flooding as well. But this increase in energy doesn't just mean an increase in temperatures and an increase in these heavy rains. It literally could change the way air flows across the globe, because you have to remember, extreme weather doesn't happen all by itself. It's part of this global flow of air. If you change the flow, you change how and where extreme weather events can occur. Now, these lines here represent the jet stream, which is just a river of fast-moving air high up in the atmosphere that kind of serves as a boundary between cold air to the north and warm air to the south. And when you see that kind of wavy up pattern going up north, that's more associated with high pressure, hot temperatures, and heat waves. When you see it dip south, that's more associated with colder temperatures, low pressure, wet conditions. And in the future, we're expecting to see this jet stream slow down, get even wavier, and basically lock in weather patterns for longer periods of time. And when you have weather patterns locked in for long periods of time, that's when you see really long heat waves. That's when you see areas under wet conditions for a very long period of time, which cause flooding. And that's when you see areas under drought, see their droughts get worse. And speaking of droughts are devastating events, can impact areas for years and years and years. And when you warm the atmosphere, it's basically like turning on those hands-free air dryer you can find in every rest stop from here to New York. It just dries out the ground, making droughts more intense and more severe and last longer. And there are certain places across the globe where we're expecting to see these droughts get worse. Pretty much around the Mediterranean Sea in southern and central Europe, South Africa, northeast Brazil, Mexico and Central America, and getting into southern and southwestern parts of the United States. And when you have worse droughts, it means less food, and that's never good. But all right, let's be honest. When I said extreme weather, when you first read about extreme weather being talked about, you probably only thought of two things: tornadoes and hurricanes. Well, here's one of them, tornadoes. Tornadoes also happen to star, by the way, in the greatest movie ever made, Twister. Helen Hunt is an American treasure. I believe that's a scientific fact. I've read a paper on it somewhere, maybe in my dreams. Look at her. It's great. So the one problem with tornadoes in the future, though, is that they're really, really freaking small compared to the rest of the globe. And there's no way that climate models that project the future can really model down to that level. But there are some tricks. There are the ingredients for tornadoes. You have moist air coming from the Gulf of Mexico, these winds that change direction. Well, they come from larger areas. And we can see how they change in the future, get an idea of how tornadoes might. So great. One little problem, though. They kind of give mixed signals. So how will tornadoes change in the future? Well, in one sense, they might increase. There's going to be more unstable air, more moist air, more thunderstorms leading to more tornadoes. On the other hand, that rotation might decrease in the future, meaning less tornadoes. So this area still needs work, but we'll get there, and we're not going to have all the answers for you right now. But all right, it's August. I finally got to the big one here. When is this guy probably going to talk about hurricanes? Here you go. You guys all probably want to see big pictures of satellites of hurricanes, and, well, here's Hurricane Sandy. Hurricanes like Sandy and Katrina and Super Typhoon Meggy, which hit near the Philippines a couple of years ago, because remember, these extreme events can happen in places besides the United States. They're really some of the most amazing and destructive events on Earth, and they happen all over the globe. Each of these lines represent a different storm in history. And in a simple way, they're easier to understand in a warming world, because hurricanes tend to like their water hot. And we're expecting to see sea surface temperatures increase in the future, providing more fuel for hurricanes to get stronger. And if hurricanes have more fuel to get stronger, then they will. And globally, we're expecting to see the most intense hurricanes increase in number. So more intense hurricanes across the globe. So imagine if you're a coastal area now, and you're adding up this equation of stronger winds, heavier rain, and don't forget higher sea level. That was kind of fun. And higher sea levels thanks to climate change as well. Well, the answer to that equation is yikes. That's not a very good equation for many coastal areas across the globe. But I'm sure you're really thinking, though, all right, great. They happen all across the globe. All I really care about is what happens here. Can you tell me what's going to happen here? It's my favorite question as a meteorologist. I can basically, what's going to happen in Iowa? I don't know. So what's going to happen across the... Well, it's much harder to tell. And the reason for that, it's like looking at a painting by Monet. From far away, you can tell what you're looking at. You see some water in the foreground, there's a clock tower and some buildings on the left. But when you zoom in on this painting, all you see is a bunch of colored brushstrokes, and you have no idea what you're looking at. And that's similar to hurricanes. From globally perspective, you can actually tell what's going to happen. But when you focus in regionally, it's much, much harder to tell. But all of this concerns me, no matter how the atmosphere decides it wants to sort out all the extra crap we're spewing into it. Because as a meteorologist, I'm going to have to try and forecast all of this for the future. And do this in an ever-changing future where the chances for extreme weather can shift. And shift in ways we don't even know yet. And sure, I may have said that meteorologists are superheroes, but even Superman had his kryptonite. And extreme weather may have spurred my interest in weather, but I'm getting kind of sick of it. Watching never-before-seen events like epic heat waves in Australia, or unbelievable flooding in Pakistan, or hurricanes taking left turns into New Jersey is sobering. So just because we don't have all the answers on the super specifics doesn't make me feel much better. Because sure, maybe some things will be okay, but other extreme events will be worse. And that's just a forecast I don't want to make. Thank you.